The ladies prepared for us. Lots of greens and bright colored things, and those berries, those were amazing. They're great. Okay, well, we're going to move on here. We talked about this morning about the gift that God gives us, a gift of life that we all appreciate. Sometimes we don't appreciate it until we do get sick, and then we recover. And then we appreciate our health more, don't we? But it says in Genesis that God made us, He redeemed us. And I like this verse from 1 Corinthians 6:20. It says, "For you were bought at a price. Therefore glorify God in your body and in your spirit, which are God's." So how do we glorify God in our body?
Eat right.
Okay, she says eat right. Don't drink, don't smoke, don't do drugs. There's all kinds of things that Satan has come along with to try to mess things up, isn't there? But as we care for the body, that's one way of bringing glory to God, isn't it? Caring for the temple that He's made for us. And we can honor Him by taking good care of our health. Okay, we're going to talk about diabetes. I think, as I mentioned earlier, diabetes is one of the fastest growing health problems in the United States. And it's very closely related to lifestyle, which we'll show as we go through here. First, just a few statistics. Almost 15% of the U.S. adult population already has diabetes in the United States. That's a pretty high percentage, isn't it?
It's because we have the American diet.
Yeah. That's and then it says 1 of 4 of them that already has diabetes is not aware that they have it. So it's good to get our blood glucose levels checked periodically and see how we're doing. And then there's something called prediabetes. That's just the early stages. It's not high enough to be called diabetes yet, but the sugar is getting high, and at that level it does do damage. It does damage in the heart and in the kidneys and in the eyes and brain, all the places where the high blood sugar levels work. And so that's not good. And of course, if you have prediabetes, it's usually not very long until you have diabetes. Notice it says 1 out of every 3 adults, that's about almost 100 million adults in the United States today, has prediabetes. And then the newest statistic says for children that are born in a generation that's coming up now, they expect that 1 out of every 3 children will develop diabetes in their lifetime. So you can see how rapid it's increasing, and everything we can do to prevent that is important. This slide just simply shows is that if you have diabetes, it's a serious health problem. They took 50,000 people. Where's my pointer here now? Here it is. 50,000 people in this study. Oops. Where did it go, forward or back? Yeah. And they simply asked them a simple question. Over 18 years, they asked them first, during that time period, did you have diabetes? No or yes? And over that 18 years, here's the difference in mortality. That's quite a difference, isn't it? Which one of those groups do you want to be in?
I'd like to be in number 1.
Like to be in number 1. I would too. Okay, so we're going to talk about how we can do that. Notice that it took off about 12 years of life expectancy, lifespan in men, and about 14 years in women. And then down here it says it shortened the years of a healthy life. That's what we all want, isn't it? Is a healthy life by 20 years. So if we can prevent that, that's certainly something that's going to help our country, isn't it? Diabetes is also one of the most costly diseases. When we were doing these programs with corporations where we would come in and we'd measure their blood glucose levels and all these different risk factors, and then identify people who had the problems, we found that the people who had diabetes, we also looked at their health claims for the year. And the best predictor of high health claims was 2 things. One was diabetes, the other one was depression. Those seem to go together. Both of them resulted in very high health care costs. So we try to work with those corporations and what we could do. So what is it? It's a disease that impairs the body's ability to use carbohydrate. All of the carbohydrate, the food is made up of carbohydrates, fats, and proteins. And the carbohydrates all have to break down into sugar, and then they are carried in the bloodstream, and then the body cells pick up that sugar and they use it for energy production. Okay? If you don't have insulin in your body, that sugar has a hard time going into the cell. The body becomes resistant to it, and the sugar can't get in. If the sugar can't get in to be used for energy, what does it do? It just begins to accumulate in the blood system, doesn't it? And gets higher and higher and higher. And when it gets high, it damages the health. It damages both the small and the large arteries and cause problems mostly, and we'll look at some of the complications here in a minute. So that's what's important. If the pancreas quits making insulin altogether, we usually call that type 1 diabetes, and that usually happens in children when they're young. It might be a virus or something they get, and it seems to kill the little cells in the pancreas that produce the insulin, and they have to have insulin to live. When the body becomes resistant to insulin, this is what happens normally in later life in adults, and is the most common, over 90% of the cases of diabetes, is not because of lack of insulin, but because the body is resistant to it. And it's resistant to it, the pancreas keeps putting out more and more insulin, trying to take care of the problem, and eventually the pancreas may just give up from overuse and not produce any insulin anymore, and then they have to use insulin taken to be able to cope too. All right. When you go to the doctor and they check your blood sugar levels, usually they do a fasting glucose test, and here you can kind of see the norms, which is generally used to help people to see. We'd like to see it under 100. As I mentioned earlier, you'd like to see it under 90. Between 90 and 100, they call that pre-diabetes, I guess. Anyway, high normal. But it has some health problems in that area too. So keeping it under 80 is the best thing that you can do. When it gets up into this range here, we call that pre-diabetes. That's the early stages, and then diabetes when it reaches 126. Sometimes the doctor will do another test. They call it A1C. That's glycated hemoglobin. When your blood sugar gets real high, it reacts chemically to the red blood cell, and they say it becomes glycated. Simply means that the sugar molecule has attached to the red blood cell, to the hemoglobin in the red blood cell. And so when that happens, you can measure that, and what that shows is how high your blood sugar has been over the last 3 months. Why 3 months? Because every 3 months all the red blood cells in your body are made new and the old ones are gotten rid of. So that's the best indicator because it gives you an idea of the whole time rather than just one day or something when you check your blood sugar.
Yeah, one of the things I find in practice, Tom, is that I'll find patients on a fasting glucose in the 90 range, so definitely under 100.
Uh-huh.
But then I always run an A1C on them as well, too, and I'll find that they're pre-diabetic.
Yes.
With a low fasting glucose. So the way that most of these comprehensive metabolic panels are run is with a reflux. So that if the glucose isn't over 100, it's not going to run an A1C.
Oh.
So you have to ask to have an A1C done as well.
Yes.
Because I find people that think their blood sugar's in the normal range, but they're actually pre-diabetic.
Yeah.
Already.
It's a more accurate test, isn't it?
It is.
And my brother had diabetes, and it was probably what caused his heart attack. That's what he died from. And my mother had diabetes, and she died from a cardiovascular complication too. So when I go to the doctor, I always tell them I want to do my hemoglobin A1C test, or just A1C. And that gives me a good indication of how I'm doing. So far, I've been doing okay on that. So here we just look at the blood levels, and as they begin to go up, this is the risk of developing diabetes. Down below 5 is very low. This is kind of the normal area in here. This is the very early part of prediabetes. And here's prediabetes, and look already. That's 4 times more likely to develop diabetes. And of course, if it gets above 6.5, that means you do have diabetes. The risk is very high. This was all done on people, healthy adults with no diabetes over 15 years. So as that goes up, your risk for getting that goes up too. It's also interesting, if you plot this time, instead of the risk of getting diabetes, you get the risk of coronary heart disease. Looks like almost the same graph, doesn't it? And as that sugar level goes up, it again causes inflammation of the arteries and causes the arteries to plug up with the cholesterol faster and causes heart disease. So most people with diabetes what they actually die from is cardiovascular disease, heart attacks and strokes. So when you're looking about preventing heart disease, you also want to prevent the diabetes that goes along oftentimes with it. So here's just a little quick picture of how high blood sugar can harm your health. It particularly works on the eyes, the small vessels in the eyes. And if you have diabetes for long enough, you may go blind. My wife's mother had diabetes, and she was blind, the last 3 or 4 years of her life?
Yeah, 3 years of her life.
3 years of her life.
My sister was juvenile diabetic, and she was only in her 40s and already losing her sight and having to have lots of things done to her eyes for bleeders in there.
My pup had diabetes and he had his foot amputated.
Oh, yeah. So there's a lot of complications, aren't there? So the eyes is one target. Kidneys are another. It works on those same little arteries in the kidneys, so they don't work properly, and then you have to have kidney dialysis or a kidney transplant or something. It damages the nerves, and especially in the feet and the hands, the periphery, and that can cause all kinds of problems. And then sometimes, because of the poor circulation and so on, they actually have to amputate one of the legs or a foot or whatever. And then, of course, because it affects the brain, it increases the risk for stroke and Alzheimer's, and especially hits the heart, and that's what most people die from. And then we often get a lot of circulation problems in the legs. So it's something we don't want. When you look at the complications, you see why it's expensive. All those complications, the eyes and the brains and the kidneys and all those kinds of things can be damaged. So that's why diabetes is the leading cause of blindness, for kidney disease, for neuropathy. That's when you have the nerve problems in the feet and so on. It causes a lot of problems and pain. Coronary heart disease, strokes, amputations, as was mentioned, and Alzheimer's disease that we talked about this morning. So that's why, again, it's so expensive. It has all of these serious complications. But the good news is that most diabetes can be prevented. And so let's look at some of the research that shows that. This was one study that was done on lifestyle and risk of diabetes, 23,000 people over 8 years. And they found that if people, let's see what I'm reading here. Oh, the lifestyle practice that they looked at was never smoking. There's 4 of them. Never smoking, maintaining a healthy weight, if they were physically active, and did they have good healthy eating habits. They had 3 markers in their nutrition. They used high intake of whole grains and cereals, at least 3 servings a day. They have a high intake of fruits and vegetables, and a low intake of red meat consumption. And they put that in the computer and looked at it over the 8 years, and here's their results. Based on the number of healthy living factors, if they didn't have any of those, they weren't eating well, they weren't exercising, they weren't, what was the other 2? Smoking and obese. And that kind of is typical of a lot of people nowadays. They don't exercise and they may smoke. So that's very common. If they just did one thing, notice what it did. Maybe they stopped smoking. Maybe they lost the weight. Maybe they started exercising. That's a huge difference, isn't it? So as you begin to make changes, you protect yourself a lot. If they had 2 of those healthy living factors and 3, and if they had all 4, notice that that's a 10-fold difference, isn't it? Only 10% risk compared to the people who didn't follow those healthy lifestyle factors. So that means that at least 90% of diabetes is preventable if we live a healthy lifestyle. It's good news again, isn't it? So we can do something about it. Problem is a lot of people don't. How about if you already have prediabetes? Does it make a difference if you change your lifestyle?
Yes.
It does, doesn't it? Let's look at that study. Here they had people who had prediabetes. They were also overweight. I think it mentioned that in the earlier part. And what else did they have? They were overweight, pre-diabetic, and sedentary. So they were setting themselves up for diabetes, weren't they? All right. So they put them on a trial, lifestyle goals, and their goal was to lose at least 7% of your weight. We find that even if you just lower your weight a little bit, 10 or 15 pounds, your risk drops down and your glucose levels will fall. So losing weight, just a small amount. Their exercise goal was to get about a half an hour of exercise a day. They put them on a high-fiber diet. We find that fiber is protective against diabetes. It slows the absorption of the glucose into the bloodstream, and so it keeps your blood sugar level lower. Lower saturated fat and lower glycemic load. And we'll kind of help you to see that.
What does that mean, glycemic load?
Well, there's certain foods, carbohydrates, that make your blood sugar level rise very quickly.
Like sugar?
Like soda pop and sugar you put in the coffee or the tea. Okay. There's other foods that are absorbed very slowly, and we'll have some charts you can look at and see about that.
Agave syrup instead of sugar.
Or fruits and vegetables and fresh things. And, Okay. So this was their goal. Then they did this for, 2.5 years, almost 3 years. And then they looked at the results. Now, part of the group were also given a medication for prediabetes. The most common one we used, I think still today, probably is metformin. Is that most common? And so they tried that, and then they looked at the lifestyle. So they had these 3 groups. One group didn't do anything. They were the kind of the control. Didn't take any medication, didn't make any lifestyle changes. Here's the group that took the metformin. Did that help? That lowered the risk some, didn't it? But notice down here, those that made a change in their lifestyle, they got the most difference, didn't they? That's a 58% lower risk of getting diabetes. So the good news, again, is even if your blood sugar level is high now, if you make changes, you're going to get good results from it. So wherever you are, whenever you start, it's helpful. So 10 ways to lower your risk of diabetes. And I've got a book with that title here. If some of you want to take one home, I think they're in the back. Yeah. You may have a friend or somebody who's concerned about that and might be helpful for them. So the number one thing, the one that causes more diabetes than anything else, is the excess body weight. And that seems to be fairly common. And it's not just in the United States anymore. We just got back from spending a month in Australia. We never saw so many heavy people in our life, I think, than when we were in Australia. And when I went there before, I did a camp meeting for them on a series once. And they told me then that they had the highest rate of obesity in the young girls in Australia of any country in the world. So it's happening all over the world. It's not just here. But as the weight goes up, the risk for diabetes goes up because the excess weight makes the body become resistant to using insulin. And when it becomes resistant, it can't use it as well, so the blood sugars rise.
Everything else goes up too. Your blood pressure, everything.
They kind of all go together, don't they? That's right. Okay, so here's BMI. Are you familiar with BMI? Stands for Body Mass Index. It's a way of measuring your weight in relationship to your height. It's kind of a calculation that you calculate. But in general terms, you'd like to see this is the healthy range. They consider the best range. People in that range have the lowest risk for heart disease and diabetes and cancer and all those other things that's related to weight. So as BMI, you can go on your computer and you just Google BMI, and they'll bring up a little calculator, and you put in your height and weight, calculate and see where you are if you haven't done it recently. Okay, then if it gets up to this area, that's just a little bit over normal, isn't it? And we're looking at prevalence of diabetes of these people in this study, and they went up.
Almost double.
Yeah, and then if it gets up into, now we're into this is the overweight range. This is kind of just slightly overweight, overweight range. Then here's the excessively overweight range, BMI of 30 and above. And as the weight goes above that, the risk just keeps going up, doesn't it? So it's very, very high. 3 to 7-fold increase. So the best thing that you can do if overweight, even if you just lose 10 or 15 pounds, it does make a significant difference. Another way you can do it is measure around the waist. And when we were doing our work with the corporations, we always did both. We'd calculate their BMI and do a waist girth measurement. It turns out that the waist circumference measurement is even a stronger indicator of diabetes than is your weight. And the reason for that is because the weight that's right around the middle, that's where us men like to put it the best, is the most dangerous. If you're carrying your weight in the hips, a little lower, it doesn't seem to be quite so dangerous. This causes the inflammation, and that's the part that is dangerous for the diabetes.
You don't have a waist.
What if you don't have a waist? Well, you know,
I don't have a waist.
it's a little harder as we get older, isn't it? Harder to find. So in men and women, I say it should be less than 36 inches. When it gets above that, then the risk goes up quickly. And for men, that should be less than 38 inches. And so that was the criteria we used in our screening for that. And this just shows what happens in waist. This particular one happens to be for men. It's very similar for women, except just a little different standard. And notice as the waist circumference gets bigger, look at that change. 10-fold difference. And so that's why we see it's even a better indicator. So that's a simple one that you can do to measure your own risk. So what are the steps we can do? As with almost all things, physical activity helps. Helps with the brain, helps with the heart, helps with the weight control, and so on. Certainly helps with diabetes. And these are the guidelines. At least 30 minutes recommended daily. That's the minimum. And if you're doing more vigorous activities like running or something, maybe only 20 minutes. And if you're counting your steps, if you get around 8,000 or more steps a day, that's when you see significant drops in mortality. And I think we probably have some slides showing that. So here's one just on how many minutes or hours of exercise per day and the risk of developing diabetes in 70,000 people over 8 years. And notice if they didn't get hardly any, just less than 20 minutes per week, that's the average risk. If they actually just got half an hour per week, did it help? Isn't that amazing? So the new guidelines and recommendations for exercise, they say any exercise you do is helpful. Even if you just go out and walk around your house for 10 minutes, 3 times a week or something, it has a measurable increase or decrease in your health problem, increase in your life expectancy. If you get 1 to 2 hours, a little bit more. Now here's when you're getting into that recommended amount of half an hour a day, 0.62, that would be a 38% decrease. And then if you need even more benefit, the longer you go, maybe 40 or 50 minutes a day, you cut the risk in half. So here again, one of the most common diseases in the United States, the one that's most expensive, could be cut in half if we could just get everybody in America exercising 40 to 45 minutes a day. Maybe 20 minutes in the morning and 20 minutes at night. It sounds simple, doesn't it? It'd have profound effect if we could get people to do that. When we were working with the corporations, we gave them all kinds of incentives and all kinds of fun things to do that. And one group I worked with was Safeway Corporation. When we started, hardly anybody exercised. 10 years when I finished with the group, 90% of the employees were getting in that category up over a half an hour a day and making big changes. And it was fun to see those changes. Why does it help? As you exercise, your body begins to change to become more sensitive to the amount of insulin. First of all, as you exercise, you just burn up the glucose that's in the blood, don't you? Because we use that glucose for energy. So one thing it does, it just burns it up. The second thing it does is it reduces the resistance that the body has made to the insulin. And that's what this study shows. They took, does it say how many? 18 people, 18 overweight sedentary subjects. And they started to exercise them half a minute or half an hour a day for 6 months. Before they exercised, this was their insulin sensitivity, how well it used insulin. And after they exercised for 6 months, notice that the sensitivity almost doubled. And so it changes the whole way the body handles fat, or not fat, but carbohydrate in your body, so that resistance goes down. Okay. Now, what if you're already a diabetic? Can exercise help? That's what this slide takes. So they took people who were already diabetics, and they divided them into these 3 groups over 8 years. Those who got no exercise, those who got 1 to 2 hours per week, and those who got the recommended amount, 3 to 4 hours per week. Notice those significant drops. So if you already have diabetes, what's one of the best things you can do? Exercise. And remember, mortality from any cause. So if you already have diabetes, you want to cut your risk of dying in half in the next 8 years? Exercise can help you do that. It's just like medicine.
Yeah, and research shows that exercise is the one way to end up getting glucose into the cell without insulin.
Yes, because it lowers that resistance.
Yep.
And exercise works almost like insulin. It's very, very helpful. Okay, another thing we can do is choose healthy foods. We'll get into specific things. And here's just quickly the things that we're trying to achieve in a diet. High in dietary fiber, because that helps. Low in saturated fat. I'm not sure why that helps, but it does. Because you look, as the saturated fat goes up in the diet, your risk of diabetes goes up. And somehow,
Cholesterol goes up
along with the cholesterol and those things, yeah.
the saturated fat, it makes more cholesterol.
Yes, it does. And it also makes the blood sugar levels higher. Foods with low glycemic index, those are the ones that are absorbed more slowly. We'll look at some charts on that. And whole plant-based foods. All the research shows if you want to have the lowest way of preventing diabetes, people who eat a whole plant-based food have the very lowest risk of diabetes, any group in America. And then limiting the highly processed and fast foods. Those foods go along with problems too.
That tastes so good.
That tastes so good, right.
Just try to avoid.
By the way, I just remembered something. Maybe some of you noticed I've got a missing tooth. What do you do when your front tooth falls out? Well, you go to the dentist, he says, I can fix that, but it's going to take about 6 to 9 months. So they put in a post. It's where the post will connect up in there. And they did that about 4 or 5 months ago, and I got to wait another month or two, and then they'll tie a tooth to it somehow. So I apologize for it, but what can you do? You just have to grin and bear it. So anyway, now you know why. My wife didn't hit me or anything. It just fell out. Okay, first of all, just a simple observation. People who eat more vegetables, guess what? Lower risk of diabetes. And if they eat somewhere around 3 or 4 servings of vegetables a day, that's where they got the real good change. And especially the leafy greens and the salads and stir-fry kinds of things, the brightly colored choices, they are just helpful, all those good things you see there, in lowering the risk. And then, am I in your way here? And then fresh fruits do the same thing. Notice the word fresh. If they're canned and they got a lot of sugar added to them, it's not quite the same, is it? When you eat them fresh, the way the Lord made them, they're also very helpful. And they're suggesting you aim for at least 2 to 3 servings of fruit every day. Limit those fruits that have added sugar. And it's best to eat the whole thing. Sometimes Americans just want to drink the orange juice but not eat the orange. But it's actually better if you get the fiber in the orange and all those other things. Eating the whole food is always best, especially for preventing diabetes or controlling blood sugar. Here's just one example, blueberries. Blueberries get a lot of press because they're very good for us. And again, they're high in the polyphenols, and they're also high in fiber, and have a kind of a glucose, or a sugar in them that's absorbed very slowly, so they have a low glycemic index. So here's in relationship to diabetes. They took 70,000 people and 41,000 men. These are amazing studies, aren't they? I forget how long the study went. I think it was 30 years. And they looked at what they were eating, and those who had blueberries regularly in their diet, look at that difference compared to those who didn't. Now, they control for other things in the diet, and they control for exercise and your weight and so on. And people who ate blueberries had less diabetes. So what's one easy way to reduce your risk?
Eat blueberries.
Yes, and strawberries are good, and raspberries, like we had for dessert down there. Those kind of foods are very protective.
What about cherries?
Cherries are very good, and cherries happen to have the lowest glycemic index of any fruit.
Really?
I don't know if I'll have my chart that'll show that or not, but extremely low. And so you can eat all the cherries you want, and it does not raise your risk at all. It's good for you.
Because I love cherries.
Yeah, me too. Okay, and here's another one, apples and pears. Apples and pears also happen to be very high in polyphenols, and that seems to be the protective effect. And if you eat more of those, 5 or more servings per week, again, a significant drop. So it's just an example. The foods, the way the Lord made them, if we eat them, instead of raising our risk, what do?
Lower it.
They lower it, don't they? Here's the one on legumes. Legumes are very good for diabetics. They're very high in fiber, have a very low glycemic index when we look at it here in a minute, absorb very slowly, and so they're very helpful. And in this study, they took 121 diabetics, and for 3 months, they had a simple thing. We just want you to eat a cup of legumes a day. That was the easy thing. Didn't change anything else. They were already had diabetes. And what they found is that their blood sugar levels of A1C fell, their blood pressures dropped, and their risk of coronary heart disease went down. So beans, very good for diabetics, or good for preventing diabetes.
What if you've got gastric problems and you can't eat beans?
Then you need to take, there's something you can eat with it called Beano. Digestive enzymes. There's one called Beano you can get at any drugstore. You eat that with the beans. They help you to break down some of those complex carbohydrates that's in the bean so they don't form gas in your stomach.
Or you can take gas afterwards.
I take the gas X all the time.
The reason they have more gas is because they have that high complex carbohydrate and high fiber. That's what is the benefit is for your health. So
The doctor suggested I stay away from beans and all the
cruciferous vegetables.
vegetables. I said, those are all the things that I love.
Those are both the kind of things that help you to live a long time too.
Yeah, but my belly gives me.
Well, sometimes you have to make some changes. Okay. If you cook them in a pressure cooker, it breaks down the carbohydrate better too, and they're less of a problem to digest. They digest easier. Okay. Choosing whole grains and limiting the refined grains. In America, we almost eat all refined grains. 90% of the calories from grains in America come from highly refined. That's like taking whole grain wheat and making it into white flour. If you go to buy a breakfast cereal for breakfast, if you look on the box, when you get something like, what are your favorite one? Apple Jacks or what was it? Cheerios actually don't have any sugar added. It's one of the few that doesn't. They're Frosted Flakes, the frosted ones, or Captain Blueberry. Most of the ones the kids like, right? And if you look on the package, it has more sugar in it than it actually does grain.
So is steel-cut oats better than rolled oats?
Yes, for glycemic index and for diabetes prevention. We'll look at that when we look at glycemic index. So when you get the whole grains, and you can see that what we're talking about here, even brown rice and the oatmeal and steel-cut oats and quinoa and some of those kinds of things, they are absorbed very slowly, and not only do they not raise your risk of diabetes, they actually lower your risk of getting it. So those kinds of grains are helpful. And they recommend at least 3 servings a day, but decrease the refined ones. So this is just showing a study on that. Again, this is 160,000 nurses for 18 years. Those are huge studies, aren't they? And they look very closely. And those who had less than 1 serving of whole grains per day, this was their risk of developing diabetes. If they got 3 or more servings of the whole grains, look at that, a 30% decrease. So that's significant. If we could just get our people to choose the whole grains rather than the refined ones, make a big difference in the health of our nation. I'm waiting for RFK to bring that up someday. He hasn't talked about that yet. All right. Then, of course, limiting sugar and sweets. And here, these, of course, are made out of white flour, so that's, again, those refined grains, aren't they? But a lot of sugar added and so on. And so they are digested very quickly, they absorb very quickly, and raise the risk.
Raise the blood sugar.
And here's the one on soft drinks. Somebody says they don't call it sodas anymore, they're called soft drinks.
I don't know what's soft about them.
I don't know either, but... Okay, sugar sweetened beverage intake. If they don't eat any, here's their risk of getting diabetes. And if it just once or twice per week, does it make a difference? A 24% increase, just think of that. Only once or twice a week. If they have 3 or more servings per week, look at that, a 34% increased risk.
What if the sodas have no sugar in them?
Yeah, that would be better, wouldn't it? That's called water.
The artificial sweeteners are.
I took out the slide on artificial sweeteners. If I had left it in, what it shows is your intake of artificial sweeteners goes up, so does your risk of diabetes. So you don't get much benefit by doing that. and some other complications. Okay, how about pure fruit juice? And so again, this large group of people we're just looking at, those who never used fruit juice, those who had a moderate and a high intake. Moderate intake was once or twice per week, and these were 3 to 4 or 5 times per week. And what do you see? What's the trend? There's no increase, is there? So using something like
Barely any increase.
orange juice does not raise your risk of diabetes. Okay, it's good to know. Eating the whole orange is better because you get extra fiber and less calories, and you get a lot of chewing. It also helps to keep the calories down. But anyway, if you're going to have something, that would be preferable to the soft drinks, wouldn't it? So the next recommendation here is eat primarily whole plant foods. You can see the list down there. And as people eat more of those foods and less of the refined ones and the animal products, here's what happens. So this is a group of about 41,000 people. These are Adventists, like most of you here today. And they divided the people into 4 groups. These are the non-vegetarians. Here's those who are the pesco-vegetarians. You heard last night, what is the pesco? Yeah, they're vegetarians except eat a little fish. And here's the lovo-acto-vegetarians, their risk of getting diabetes. And who had the lowest one?
Vegan.
Yeah, almost decreased the risk by 2/3. What does the vegan do? Well, they just eat all plant foods, don't they? And usually whole. So as far as diabetes goes, they have the lowest risk of any group.
What if you're diabetic and you're a vegan, it doesn't make much difference?
If you're a diabetic and you're not producing any insulin, it doesn't matter. All you have to do is balance your insulin with how much carbohydrate you're eating. It has other benefits, though, to the heart, to the circulation, and so on. So it still helps to follow these guidelines. All right, and this one is red meat intake, and we've seen a lot on that today. This is from the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition. Very large study, over 200,000 people for over 20 years. Those eating the most red meat had a 62% increased risk of developing diabetes. Isn't that something? Those are huge differences, aren't they? That's where somehow that saturated fat seems to change our metabolism so that we don't handle the sugar properly too. And so cutting that down helps. Notice down below, if they just substituted 1 serving of the red meat with nuts or legumes, plant proteins, notice they reduced the risk of diabetes by 30% with just that one little change. So it helps us to see what foods raise the risk, which ones lower the risk. Here again we see the
What constitutes a serving of nuts?
1 ounce, be 1/4 of a cup, approximately. Now, here's red meat and type 2 diabetes. This is the Harvard Health Study, over 200,000 men and women, 28 years of follow-up. And they compared people who had no meat in the diet, those who had a small amount of red meat, I think that's per serving, notice it went up, just 3 ounces. If they had just 2 ounces of processed meats, what would they be? It'd be the sausages and bacon and those kind of things. Even worse, isn't it? But if they had nuts instead, 1/4 of a cup, there's your 1 serving of nuts, look what it did. It even dropped lower than those just with no meat in their diet. So very protective. So all that illustrates is the animal foods raise the risk and the plant foods lower the risk. There's kind of a trend there, isn't it? Okay, healthy fats. We're going to look at the plant fats just quickly. Those foods that are rich in the polyunsaturated fatty acids and plant oils are protective against diabetes. There's 2 basic kinds of fats that we mostly eat. There's the saturated fats. Those are the animal fats. You can always tell them because they're solid at room temperature, especially if you put them in the fridge.
Well, coconut oil is at room temperature is usually solid.
It is, and that's a saturated fat. That's a saturated fat, and it doesn't do much good for you. It raises problems. Okay? Examples.
Great in lotion and soap.
Yes. Examples of the best sources, of course, where the healthy fats will really come from. Nuts are very high in fat, but they're very healthy. It's a healthy fat, isn't it? That's why people who eat nuts have less diabetes and less heart
Only
problems.
1/4 of a cup, that's not very
No, but they're very dense, so they have a lot of calories,
A lot
don't they?
of people just don't stop at a quarter.
But they do have a lot of satiety too. And there's some studies that show that people who eat nuts regularly are less likely to become obese because of the satiety of the nuts seems to help them eat less overall. Avocado is a very high in fat, but also very healthy fat, and is protective against diabetes and heart disease. Olives and olive oil, flax meal. You ever use flax meal? You get the flax that's all ground up, and you can put it in your foods.
And then I grind it myself.
Yeah, flax happens to be about the highest source of the omega-3 fatty acids that you can eat. And just a tablespoon a day will give you all the alpha-linolenic acid, one of the essential amino acid,
Take it in a pill.
essential fats that you need.
Flax oil.
You take it in a pill. Okay. I like it in flax.
Because they want me to take fish oil. I says I won't take it.
Uh-huh. Flax oil has the omega-3s too, doesn't it? Okay. So plant fats, let's look at this study, where they simply took people and divided them into these 5 groups. We call those quintiles. This is the lowest percent of calories from plant fats in the diet. And those who had more plant oils, more, and more, what happens to the risk of developing diabetes? Now, is that a bit of a surprise? That's one thing I've got to talk to RFK about. He's against plant fats. I'm not sure why. All the research shows that they're healthier for you than the animal fats.
Yeah, so our cell membranes are made of fat.
Yeah,
So
right.
not all fats are created equal.
No.
So
And there's only 2.
if you eat unhealthy fats, those can make up your cell membranes as well too.
Yeah, and they don't work as well.
Yeah.
And the only two required fats that you have to live is linoleic acid and alpha-linolenic acid. And both of them are unsaturated polyunsaturated fatty acids.
Because he's talking like all this stuff about beef tallow.
I know. I don't know where he's getting this from. He needs a little help on that one. But notice, as the plant fats go up, the risk of diabetes goes down. Most people are amazed when they see that. If we had that for heart disease, it would be the same thing, by the way. Now, here's a study on nuts. We talked about nuts. This is from the Journal of the American Medical Association, 16-year study. Those eating the most nuts had a 29% less diabetes than those seldom eating nuts. So eat nuts every day. Eat a variety, as you see in the picture there. They're all healthy. They're all good for you. Good plant proteins. Did I go too fast? Okay. Here's animal fats again raise the risk of getting diabetes. Now we're looking at animal fat or saturated fat in the diet. Notice as the percent of calories from saturated fat goes up, what happens to the risk of getting diabetes?
It goes up.
So they're just the opposite, aren't they? So if you replace the animal fats with plant fats, your risk will go down. And that's one of the best ways to prevent diabetes. I see a hand up there in the back. Did you have a question? Oh, just stretching, huh? Oh, it was your son. I couldn't see his head. All I saw was the hand. Oh, good. He's a good boy. He's willing to sit through all this stuff here. The next one is to choose low glycemic index foods, and that means foods that are absorbed more slowly. And how can you tell how fast a food is absorbed? Well, they do tests. They actually check your blood every few minutes after you eat a certain food, see how fast it goes up. So here's these little curves kind of show you. First of all, glycemic index is a measure of how fast the carbohydrate in food is absorbed and measured in the blood. So they feed you a food. In this case, we're going to look at a high glycemic index food. It might be like white bread. Okay? When you first eat it, in times, your blood sugar level climbs very quickly and goes way up high because it's absorbed very fast. Okay? You compare that to a low glycemic food, such as lentils or beans or something. Notice it goes up more gradually, doesn't go nearly so high, comes back down to about the resting area. Notice when you have something that's high in sugar or high in absorbed quickly, like white bread or sugar, notice that when you get down to the place where you started, it overshoots and you go down to hypoglycemia. How do you feel when you have low blood sugar? Yeah. Yeah, you don't feel good, and what do you want to do? Eat.
A lot.
So where I had my office in Portland, it was right next to a 7-Eleven store. And every morning about 11 o'clock or 10 o'clock somewhere in there, people's blood sugars had gone way down because they didn't eat steel-cut oats for breakfast. And where do you suppose they were going? They would disappear into 7-Eleven, come back with a big gulp, a lot of sugar. Made them feel good because it brought their sugar level right up again. And then what would it do again? Go right back down.
Yo-yo.
Yeah. So it's not good for us. And when you're up here in this high level, that sugar's got to go somewhere. Where do you suppose it's going to go?
Right into your bloodstream.
Well, it goes into your
Right.
fat stores. When it gets up real high that way, it has to clear it out of your blood where it can't go out into thin air. So once your muscles are full of glycogen, then that goes stores in the fat.
Made into triglycerides.
And it's converted into triglycerides and stored as fat.
On blood tests, that's how you know if a patient's lying or not.
Also, when you're up in this high area, that's where it begins to glycate or connect to the protein in the red blood cells and causes that glycated hemoglobin, or A1C. That also does the same thing to the lining of your blood vessels. That high sugar reacts to it chemically and damages it. And that's why you get blindness and kidney failure and all these kind of things from the high blood sugar levels. So we measure that, and actually what a glycemic index is, we take a standard, and the standard usually is glucose. Glucose is a fancy name for sugar. And you see how fast it goes up, and then you compare everything else to that. So you can see here, we'd give that a value of 100, or usually, they used to go on a scale from 0 to 100. And this one down here only goes up maybe less than half as much, so it might have a glycemic index maybe of 40%. See how that works? It's only 40% as much sugar going into the blood as in the other one. So now let's look at some tables and just kind of look at different foods. High glycemic index foods are shown in this list. Low glycemic foods are shown over here. High ones have a value of 70 or higher, and they raise the risk for diabetes. If it's a low glycemic index, be 55 or less. In between is kind of no man's land. Okay, so let's look at some of that. White bread, 71, way up there high, isn't it? Look down here at table sugar. Table sugar is 70.
What about pasta?
We'll get to that. Did you know that white bread raises your blood sugar just as fast or faster than pure sugar? People don't realize that. It's highly refined, and it just digested very quickly. Potatoes do the same. Do we have potatoes on there? There they are, 82. They even are better. They're raising your blood sugar, aren't they? Soft drinks. Sweet potatoes are kind of just almost between these two here, but it's better. Here's cornflakes. Where did cornflakes come from?
Corn.
Do I remember right? Was that one of the inventions of Kellogg? They started the cornflakes industry and so on.
I hate cornflakes.
But they grind them all up, and they're real fine. And even though they might be made from whole corn, they are absorbed very quickly, even faster than pure sugar. So not a good thing if you're trying to keep your...
What about pasta? That's what I want to know.
We'll get to pasta. You remind me.
On that list,
I'll show you, I think, with some lists that got coming up. Pasta would be over here. There's something about pasta when they make it into pasta that it makes it absorb very slowly. And so it's better. But the best kind of pasta you'll see is the whole grain pasta.
And it's the tomato sauce that will take and raise your sugar.
So look over here in the low glycemic ones, things like lentils. Look at that, 29, way down there. So those are the kinds of food that's good for diabetes. Leafy vegetables, 15. Oranges, 40. Apples, 40. Even though they're high in carbohydrate, they're absorbed slowly and they're very good. Here's the steel-cut oats, 42. Bran flakes, because it's got the extra fiber in it. Almonds and nuts, 15. Soy milk, only 30. So those foods over here are very low. They prevent diabetes from occurring. These over here are the things that increase the risk for diabetes. Which list do most people eat from in America? They eat mostly over here, don't they? And that's why there's so much diabetes. Comment here.
I have a question about the oats. Why steel cuts? What about the other oatmeal like the
Yeah, okay, she's asking about the steel-cut oats. part of how fast something is absorbed is how refined it is. So if you take the whole oat kernel and you just cut it in 2 or 3 places, if you cook steel-cut oats, they're almost the whole kernel, aren't they? They're just cut twice. That's why they call them steel-cut oats. They're very unrefined yet. And when you cook them, that takes how long? 20 to 30 minutes, doesn't it? Before they're soft enough you can eat them. So they're in big chunks, and they're absorbed more slowly because the digestive enzymes have a hard time getting in there and breaking that all up. If you take that same kernel and you heat it a little bit with some steam and so on, and you smash it real flat, then you have oats.
Roll those.
And then when you cook them, how long does it take? 5 minutes or less, right? And so it's easy for them, when they're digested, for the enzymes to get in there and absorb more quickly. If you get quick oats, what do you suppose?
That's
They're absorbed even faster.
sugar.
Uh-huh. And we'll probably see this in a minute. So it's the physical state that it's in. It's the same with wheat. If you take whole wheat and you grind it up really fine and make this really kind of whole wheat bread that's just kind of like sponge cake, it's absorbed just as fast as white bread. Now, it does have more fiber, has more minerals and vitamins in it, but as far as glycemic index, it's just about the same. So when you buy a whole grain bread, you want to get the kind that is very rough, that's been less
Dense.
ground. Right here. That's the, what's his name again? Killer Dave bread is an example where it's that way. Ezekiel bread is another example that way. Okay, I don't want to spend too much time on these. My pastor's saying I need to speed up here, so let's look at some individual foods. These are the fresh fruits, and if it's below 70, it's a low glycemic. And look down here, they're all aren't they? Look at cherries. Who asked about cherries? It's down there, 22. There's hardly any food that's lower than that. Even though it tastes good and it's sweet, it's the kind of sweet that the Lord made that's good for us. Okay? The only one that's higher than that is watermelon. Just slightly above.
On the cherries, though, isn't it the amount that counts?
Well, when you're a diabetic, you're looking at the total amount of carbohydrate in a food. And so you have to balance that with your insulin. For the rest of us, we don't have to worry about that. We have to look at the glycemic index. If it's very low, then it's not going to cause a problem. Okay, we'll go through these quickly. Just kind of look down the list. Here's vegetables. What do we find on vegetables? And come back to these. The rest of them are very good, aren't they? All of them are good. Getting out here, the spinach, the leafy greens, peppers, lettuce, all those kind of things, onions, asparagus, mushrooms, extremely low. So these are what we want to eat. There's only 2 things up here that are high, and what are they? Potatoes. So be careful. If you have a tendency towards diabetes or family history, if you're overweight or whatever, keep the tomatoes or potatoes not very often in your diet, just occasionally. My brother had potatoes every morning for breakfast his whole life, and he developed diabetes. My mother the same. So I have potatoes occasionally, but I try to space it out a ways. My wife, we made good potato salad. We enjoyed that, didn't we? Okay, so vegetables are very good. Here's the grains. Which ones are better than others? What's a baguette? French bread. 95.
Wow.
I don't know why, but that's about the highest of any bread. Cornflakes are real close, aren't they? Here's white rice. What's white rice going to do for you? It'll raise your risk for diabetes, won't it? Yeah. And here's instant oatmeal. Not very good, is it? Even though it's a whole grain. And rice cakes, for some reason, they're absorbed very quickly. And going on down, here's white bread, and we didn't put whole wheat bread there, but if it's finely ground, it'd be real close. Pancakes, those are all made out of white bread, aren't they? Now here's another one down here, basmati rice. Now basmati rice has a different type of carbohydrate in it that's absorbed more slowly, and it's actually in a low glycemic group. So if you have to have white rice, try to get basmati. All the rest would be high.
I just bought 2 pounds of basmati.
Uh-huh. And the very best is brown rice, isn't it? Look down there, 50. And so what I do is I buy brown basmati rice, and be even lower than that. So the kind of food you eat. And you can see oatmeal, all bran, because of the high fiber. some of these kinds of things down here. Here's the whole grain, coarsely ground bread, 51. And here's your pasta, spaghetti, whole grain, 42. So if you get the whole grain pastas, very low glycemic index.
What about just plain pasta, white pasta?
It would be up a ways, wouldn't it? But it's still lower than white bread. And on the group there, the steel-cut oats is one of the lowest, maybe you noticed. Here's on legumes, and what do we see on legumes? They're all very low, aren't they? That's why when you eat legumes, it's very good for diabetics. The highest one is baked beans. That's probably higher because they put sugar in it when they make them. But the chickpeas, the black beans, and so on going down here. How about peanuts? Only 14. And so those are good foods to eat. They're healthy for us, very low for glycemic index and low for risk of diabetes. Now here's some other things. Here's some beverages, Gatorade, soft drinks up there very high. Cranberry juice just a little below. But notice orange juice, 50. Did you know that orange juice is lower than even most whole grain breads? Isn't that something? It's a different kind of sugar that's there. It's absorbed more slowly. And of course, if you eat the whole orange, it's better. And tomato juice, very low. And then here's glucose. That's the standard. It's always set at 100. Rice milk. Now, some people use rice milk because they think it's better than milk. But it has practically no protein, has 1 gram of protein per serving, and the kind of carbohydrate in it is absorbed very, very fast, and so it's worse for you than regular cow's milk. Cow's milk down here is 41. Ice cream higher because it's got the sugar added, doesn't it? The table sugar.
Soy milk is 30.
And notice soy milk is 30. So it'd be good for preventing diabetes, wouldn't it? Okay. So we're going to have to go fast here because I think my time is up.
It's still Sabbath. It's still Sabbath. I'm in no hurry.
You won't throw me out?
No.
We'll try to finish up here in the next 10 minutes or so.
It's still Sabbath, so no problem.
Just relax, huh?
Yeah.
Okay. They say relax, Pastor. So, smoking increases the risk of diabetes. No matter what disease it is, smoking always makes it worse, doesn't it? Okay, so I think we're clear on that. 30 to 40% more likely to get diabetes if you smoke. Here's one, managing stress in your life. Who would have thought stress has anything to do with diabetes? But it can. And as you get under a lot of stress, the body's hormones change, don't they? The stress hormones, glucocorticoids they call them, and catecholamines, what's the simpler name for that? Yeah. Anyway, as those enzymes go up, if you're under chronic stress for long periods of time, what do you suppose they do? They mobilize, break down your protein actually, and change it into glucose. And your blood glucose levels can go up. Now, this is not usually the cause of diabetes, but in some cases it has. And I've worked with a few people where that was the real problem. And once they got away from all the chronic stress, their blood glucose levels went back to normal. First, they do several things. This is taken from a medical journal that just read a couple days ago. These hormones decrease the amount of insulin your body produces. So you need more insulin to lower your blood sugar. It increases insulin resistance, raises blood glucose, and over time, it says, can contribute to the development of diabetes. So that's something to be aware of. And what can we do for stress?
We need to find uses.
We need some stress breakers once in a while, don't we? Sabbath is a stress breaker, right? We can leave the work behind and we can just enjoy the day. And God says, rest. If you're tired, you can sleep. That's okay. Read the Bible. Listen to some pretty music.
The Bible says Jesus will give you peace that passes understanding.
That's right.
No more stress.
Go for a walk. A lot of things we can do. But we need to build these kind of stress breakers in all the time, don't we? One of my favorite is listening to relaxing music. And taking a warm bath can be a favorite of many people, my wife included. Pray or meditate, what we were just talking about. Take a walk outside. Enjoy a relaxing hobby. Play with the grandkids. Read a good book. Read the Bible. Spend time in nature. I love going out and just walking through the trees and walking by the lake, the stream.
Until it gets to be 100 degrees.
Until it gets over 100. Then you need to get out earlier, don't we? But anyway, these things break it, don't they? And it causes those stress hormones to come down, puts our body back in balance. So stress is only a problem if we stay up there all the time. But if you relax and break it with some other fun things to do, then that helps to improve that.
Helps is God gave us ashwagandha. Ashwagandha will help.
Oh, okay.
Lower your stress level. It would calm you down.
Yeah.
Yeah, they have it at Sam's Club right now.
Oh, okay.
Ashwagandha helps lower your stress level.
Good. Okay, I wasn't familiar with that. Thanks.
You can get it in a gummy.
Yeah, at Sam's Club.
Always good.
Now, we talked about vitamin D and Alzheimer's. Guess what? It's also protective against diabetes. And this is the Framingham Offspring Study. Years ago, the very first large group of people was in Framingham, Massachusetts. They followed the whole city, or a good part of the city, to see who would develop heart disease. And then since they found out the risk factors for heart disease, then they said, well, now let's look at some other things. So they looked at their intake of vitamin D. And what did they find? Those in the upper third, in other words, the upper third of vitamin D for being in healthy range, had 40% lower risk of developing type 2 diabetes. That's quite a change, isn't it? So that was one of the first studies that came out on that. And we said, if you want to know, you have to ask your doctor because they can check that for you. And then here's another large one, 1,000 people. And they looked at their vitamin D level in the blood. And they have these 3 levels that are deficient, insufficient, not quite enough, and sufficient. And then they looked at their levels of developing type 2 diabetes over 11 years. And what did you find? If they were deficient, that's about 3 times as high, isn't it? And this one's twice as high. So is it important to get enough vitamin D?
Yeah.
And
What
most,
is the proper amount of vitamin D?
so that your blood levels come up. And when the doctor,
What is the normal for the blood levels?
what is it, 50 micrograms, or what's the unit that it's in?
International unit.
IUs, okay.
Yeah.
50 IUs. Your doctor will tell you when he does it, he'll put you in one of these 3 categories. And what you want to be is up in this level.
I take the vitamin D, I just don't know what
Uh-huh.
whether I'm taking enough or not.
Yeah, the only way you know is to have a blood test done.
Okay.
And my doctor did it on me about a year ago, and mine was right up where it used to be. I think I mentioned this morning that when first time I checked it, it was way down low in this category. And so what I've been doing over the years since then is I take 2,000 microgram or international units a day, and mine has come up. Jamie is telling me that with his patients, sometimes it takes 5,000 or more to get it up into that range. And sometimes the doctor will give even higher levels, but you don't want to take too much. The Institute of Medicine says that the upper limit for safe is 4,000 international units. If your doctor's checking it regularly and it doesn't get too high, he might give you a little more. But most people, what is the organization? The immunologists, they recommend about 2,000 international units a day for most people.
Okay, I'll check and see what I'm taking.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And the Institute of Medicine suggests not to take over 4,000 without a doctor's direction, because if you get too high, it can actually cause some problems. Mm-hmm. Yes?
Part of the problem with the vitamin D, it passes through the system without absorbing. So if you take K2 with it, then it absorbs in your system.
You take A2?
K2.
Oh, K2. Yes, thanks. My wife reminded me of that this morning. That helps it to be absorbed. And where do you find K2? Leafy greens. Leafy greens are high in vitamin K. 1 good serving of broccoli or whatever gives you all you need for the day. So eating these other healthy foods with it, that shows how they all work together, doesn't it? Thanks for reminding me on that. Okay. Then just in the last slide here, I think, if you're a diabetic already, we've been talking about preventing diabetes, but maybe you already have it. Here's kind of some the ABCs for the diabetic. First thing you want is the doctor usually wants to get your A1C level below 7. If you do that, that helps to prevent a lot of the damage that can occur to your eyes and kidneys and so on. It's important to get the blood pressure low, because high blood pressure damages all the same things that high blood sugar does. Damages the eyes, the kidneys, and so on. So they want to keep your blood sugar low. And they also want to keep your cholesterol in a healthy range because, again, it kind of does the same thing. It damages the eye, not the eyes so much, but the brain and the heart and so forth. And what are you going to die from if you have diabetes? Cardiovascular disease, almost always. So that's what they're recommending here. Then the dietary goals: eat primarily whole plant-based foods, the way the Lord made them as much as you can, foods high in fiber and low in glycemic index. Now you know what glycemic index is. And then the last thing is exercise daily, at least a half an hour a day, something that you enjoy. Get your doctor's approval if you have diabetes. And remember, we saw that one slide. If you exercise regularly, what happens? Your risk of dying from diabetes was cut in half in that study, wasn't it? So those are the ABCs if you already have diabetes. And then this is just a summary, all the things we've talked about. We don't need to probably go over all those, but those are the things that make a difference. You see, there's a lot we can do, isn't there? A lot we can do to prevent it. And then I just wanted to finish with this. It says, God's gift to us is life. He wants us to have it, abundant life. Remember, what was it last week? Pastor used that as his key text in his sermon. I've come to give you life. And what kind of life?
More abundant.
An abundant life. So that's my desire too. May you enjoy good health and abundant life as you seek for wisdom and guidance in our walk with the Lord. Okay. I hope we've answered most of the questions. If you have any other questions, we can take right quick, or we can talk afterwards. I don't want you to sit too long. It's not good to sit too long, is it? Pastor, did you have any closing remarks?
Yes.
May I have a raffle?
Yes, we are. Thank you so much, Dr. Don. How many are we thankful that Dr. Don Hall had these presentations? Thank you so much. Appreciate it so much, Doctor. Any questions for Dr. Hall? No? All right. Okay. The cool thing is that both him and his wife are members of our church, so if you guys have any other questions for him, or I know we have some medical people here in our church as well. We got Jamie, we got Troy Bertoli, so there's quite a few that work in the medical field, so more than happy to answer those. So, Junior, can you come up here for me, please? So this morning I passed out some tickets, but because we are a smaller group and I don't want this to be bigger pull than what it is, I'm going to give you, these are the real ones, okay? The ones I gave you in the morning, those were just to incentivize. These are the real ones, so can you give one to each person, please? One to each person. So the ones that you have right now, you guys can throw them away. These are the real ones. And no, I was just hoping there was going to be more. So bigger pool. We're going to make it a little smaller pool now.